Shalom, shalom.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Trying to get this right. Let's see. Tonight we are going to go over our basic beginnings, the basics of beginnings. So we're supposed to have some people showing up here, and a lot of times, even no longer how long we're a part of this or what we're doing, that it's great to know what we're doing. It's great to know the beginnings and what we're searching for in these beginnings and how to tell others. So even coming into this, we have to witness to others. And mainly what we run into is different denominations, right? So you have whatever the denomination may be that you're running into. And in many cases, what we're finding out is we're trying to combat Sunday law, Sunday church, how many commandments, 10 commandments, 3 commandments, 1 commandment. What are we trying to accomplish? So from the beginning that Yahweh made Adam, right? He made him in his image. So I would submit that the reason why he didn't hand him a big old bucket of rocks, the reason why he didn't hand him all these different things is he didn't need to, because he knew this, right? He didn't have to say, because they walked and talked in the garden, that they spoke to each other. So with all this going on, then Adam didn't need the commandments. He knew them. He was made in the image. So as we see in time go by that man is doing, because of the fall, because of sin, men keeps having this fallen state, and over and over and over, we keep doing dumb things to make it, just as simple as can be. So within that, what happens is we find a lot of things going on that are just not right. So the reason why that we keep having these problems, I would submit, is because we don't know how to educate each other, for better words, right? For better things, that we don't know how to take it. And because we get emotional, because we get upset, and there's nothing wrong with getting emotional and upset and these things, because if we've been told these stories for years and years and years, right? December 25th, if you're told that, well, when you're 13 or 15 or whatever, 9, whatever the age may be, you're probably not the happiest camper in the world, right? You're probably not the happiest little boy and girl when you find out, hey, this is an untruth. Why was I told this? Why wasn't I told this? And so from that is where I believe that a lot of people get, they call it zealous, or they call it upset, or they call it this, that, and the other. But what happens is we get all these problems and we're trying to fight untruths, right? So Exodus 20, and Yahweh spoke all these words saying, I am Yahweh, your Elohim. And we're going to leave this, a lot of times we change it to Yahweh and change it. But for the world's sake, and for those people coming into this, sometimes what we find is they don't know what we're speaking, almost a foreign language. Even Hebrew is a foreign language to the world. And when you start getting the Paleo Hebrew, and when you start getting, the farther back, sometimes it almost becomes too complicated for some people. So with all that being said, we're just going to leave it for what it is, and then people can understand. And I do this on the sometimes on the radio too, that people say, well, why would you say God instead of Elohim? Or why would you say, I thought you never said those? But when we're talking to people, we have to let those people know what we're saying. And sometimes when we're speaking to them, they have to comprehend, where we're coming from. And I'm sure we can probably understand that if we wasn't raised in this, when people come and say these things, and we kind of get, what's going on. So with all that being said, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Now, this is amazing because we keep seeing we go into slavery all these times, right? We keep going into either a physical slavery or we keep going into a mental slavery. And in this age is almost kind of both. We are so bound into what we say, what we do, that everything becomes a type of slavery that we're trying to break out of. And that's what, coming to the Sabbath, that's what all this is really about, is not being, it's almost the opposite of what the world says. We're binding ourselves, we're cursing ourselves, but actually we're finding freedom in the Sabbath. We're finding freedom in pleasing the Creator instead of, it's a burdensome thing to please the Creator who made us, who created and gives us such great life and things. It's just the opposite of what the world sees, because they don't see it clearly as a lot of us start seeing. The more we do this, I believe the more feast days, the more years, the more people just clearly see that we're doing it for the Creator because we love Him. It's not, a lot of people in the world, a lot of different, denominations try to say, well, you're trying to earn your salvation. And it's not that at all. We're not trying to earn. We know who we are. We know we're not worthy. We know all these things. But knowing that, why wouldn't we do all we can to try to please the Creator? You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am jealous Elohim, visiting the iniquity of the fathers of the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. So again, we're not just doing it. This is not a selfish thing. A lot of people say, well, you're doing it for yourself, but it's not a selfish thing whatsoever. We're doing it not only for us, but for our children and for their children. We're trying to pass down the same thing, I would submit, from the beginning. The exact same thing that He wanted for Adam, that He wanted for Cain and Abel, that He never wanted anyone to perish. And He says it's not His will that anyone perish, and He doesn't take delight in that. So a lot of times I believe if we would just understand that and be able to pass that on, and I know I get some friends right now that's going through some hard times trying to get this down, not only for themselves, but everybody around them is like, you're messing up, you're doing the wrong thing, you're just throwing away grace and mercy. But we see clearly grace and mercy was there in the garden, or they would have been done. That, as soon as they touched of the tree, as soon as that. So we see grace and mercy from the beginning, that He's even let us live. And we see it all the time, even when, when we break a commandment, when we say something, when we do things, we can see that is such, so much around us. Deuteronomy. And Moshe summoned all Israel and said to them, "Hear, O Israel." Now, this is where a lot of people get that there's, only one tribe, and they say you're trying to be a Jew or Judah, but there's more tribes than even Yehuda, right? So all Israel is everyone. It's not just a one tribe thing. It's not just, it's everybody. And in this case, even if someone would have came in, even if they said, hey, we want to follow your Elohim, he is the true living Elohim. He is the true God even, right? I don't think they would have been kicked out for saying that. I believe they could have come in, just like the scriptures say. Everybody who wants to come in can come in. And this is where I believe that we a lot of times miss it on both sides, because we look at one church, one denomination, and I say that because I've been to them, right? There's some churches, if you don't believe this way, then you're in trouble. And other churches, and it goes on and on until it's, it's isolation almost, right? It's separating, it's pushing each other to a corner, and then we're trying to defend ourselves instead of saying, hey, here's the truth, and just stand on the word. And that's all we really need to do. So hear, O Israel, the statutes and the rules that I speak in your hearing today, and you shall learn them and be careful to do them. So we got to be careful in even doing, and we find this so hard, especially as new believers. We're zealous. We want to break the rock in two. We want to smack the rock. We want to sledgehammer the rock and watch all the people come out and be saved and be immersed and all these things. But if we're not careful, even in our zealous, sometimes we get overwhelming to others, that it's hard for us to just hold back a little bit. Sometimes it is for me anyway. When I know it's the truth, when I see there's life and death, it's a really easy choice. It's choose life. It's really, really easy. Let's just choose life and let's live and let's do that. But for people that don't really understand that, I guess it's harder for them to really understand the gray, or the, where life is and where this goes. So Yahweh, our Elohim, made a covenant with us in Horeb. So they took the covenant, they took the wedding vows, they said, I do, right? So when you make that covenant, when you make the wedding vows, then he expects you to keep them. And a lot of times, I don't think a lot of people know what the covenant is. It's like they've entered a marriage and they don't understand marriage, right? And you see this sometimes with, that's why we have a problem with people getting married at 10 or 12, because they don't know what they don't know what a marriage is. How can you be married? You don't know what love is. You don't know anything of a covenantal relationship. So that's where we see that how could you have any relationship? How could you do anything at that age? Because you don't realize it. It's not until you get older that you understand, well, now I'm a part of a covenant. This is a relationship, but this is a covenantal relationship. If my wife says she don't like this and I continue to break that, or if we entered into a covenant and we are breaking the covenant on both sides, well, now we have a problem. Well, the same thing with Elohim. If he says this is his covenant, whether we like it or not is kind of our problem. I hate to put it that way, but whether we like that or not, it's kind of like we have to deal with it, right? And there's sometimes I think we see that in relationships with us. We may not like what we have to go through. We may not like sitting all night at the hospital. We may not like doing this, but we do it because that's our job. It's our duty, and not because we have to. We're doing it because of the love, right? So with that being said, I believe that's what we should show the Creator. We're not doing it. And I think that's where the big disconnect comes here between, like my brother Neil, he's having both sides fighting here back and forth. And I think they're missing the covenant of what is expected and what he expects us. So not with our fathers did Yahweh make this covenant, but with us, who are all of us here alive today. Yahweh spoke with you face to face at the mountain, out of the midst of the fire, where I stood between you and Yahweh, and you at the time to declare you to the word of Yahweh. So again, they didn't have a problem with it then. And I don't think a lot of people have a problem with the covenant, with the Creator, until we start getting into our own lust, into our own things, and by lust, I don't mean terrible things. It's just sometimes we get into the worldly things. We got cars, we got life, we have to be a part of that. I mean, there's a lot of communities and people want to be communities, but overall, we're still dealing with the world in many aspects. So with that being said, and even, people that are in communities and they go to these different places, that it's a hard time being a light into the world. It's a hard time hiding your light away from the world, because that's kind of the part of being the light in this world, is showing that light and showing them that somebody can live this life. And even though they may not understand it, maybe they don't get you, the parents or grandparents or even brothers and sisters, maybe they don't understand, but if we stay the course, if nothing else, they see what we're doing and they understand why we're doing it. Even though we can tell them again and again, sometimes it's like they don't understand, but they'll understand. For we were afraid because of the fire, and you did not go up to the mountain. So a lot of times I believe this is what a lot of people's problem is too. They're afraid to get all in, because when they get all in, honestly, now you're talking to the Creator. Now the Creator and you are in a covenant. And now you have to actually believe, and you have to actually, you're doing something as well, right? As on the other side, we're just praying and we're just kind of doing, and it's kind of a happy chance. We kind of hope he answers that prayer. We kind of realize he answers, and it becomes like a hit and miss thing, where the Hebrew is, we're hitting it every time. It's like the marksmanship, right? We're seeking for perfection. And once we do that, we know, are we here, right? That we know that he's going to answer this prayer, or it's not his will. And a lot of times there's people that go through things because they have a different road to take, right? There's people I know right now that's going to walk a path, and they know they're going to walk a path that's different than most people, but he's going to bring them through it, and he's going to help them through it. And they're probably going to have more witnessing and more life surrounding and touching more people than they did in their whole life in just a couple of years. And so as a harvest, as witnessing to people, a lot of times we don't want to hear the news of, bad things. We don't want to hear the news of what we're going to have to walk through. We don't like to hear that. But when we see these things happening, and sometimes it takes the whole other side to realize how much of a blessing that was, right? And I mean, just like for us, honestly, when we first found out these things and these things was going wrong, we was honestly like, well, this ain't what we're supposed to be a part of. We're believers, we're Sabbath keeper, we do this, we really, what did we do wrong? So a lot of times I think when people walk through things, and that's good, there's nothing wrong with repentance and saying and making sure that you're not doing something wrong. And that should be, the first part of everything. But then after that is realizing what your purpose in life is and what you can do. And that is a whole, to say something like that and to live it is a whole different world, honestly. There's a lot of people that can say, I'll walk through this and I'll walk through that fire and I'll do all these things. But when you actually start going through them, you do have times, you do have doubts, you do have questions. But with all that being said, we stand on the covenant of Yahweh, because truthfully, we're all probably going to find a hospital one day. We're all going to have something happen. We're all going to have things that we just maybe not see coming. But when we know where we're going, when we know we are in covenant, it makes a whole difference, right? There's a whole difference, I would hope, between 20, 30 years ago when you lay your head down and you think, man, I hope I don't die tonight because I don't know what's going to happen, as opposed to, well, I don't see anything happen, but Father, let there be shalom and let this be, your will be done. And with that type of mentality is a whole different world. And the world sees that shalom. When you go places and you talk to people, they should feel that shalom. They should feel that. And in almost every situation, and that's how we can really show the world that light, that true peace, that true inner peace that passes all understanding. And he declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, that is the commandments, the 10 commandments, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. Now, when we back up to this, in many studies, and the stones, I got another one that's probably an hour or so long about this, that the 10 commandments, as far as we know, came from the 10 words, which came from the Egyptians. That's where we get the difference of religious 10 commandments as the 613 commandments. But it's funny, 6, 3, and 1 equals 10, and Egypt has 10 words or 10 commandments, and they also had 10 gods. So the whole study of that is they was written on the sapphire stones, like the pretty little blue stones that we have, and they was written on that, and they was given, and Yahweh himself gave them to Moshe. And it makes sense, because 10 commandments in 40 days, that doesn't work out so good. But if you got 613 commandments and you go over them, it takes what, about 8 to 12 hours to go through them. And if you go through them, an hour or 2 hours a day or something like that, plus you're going to review and go over it. But for a lot of people, what we do, or what I would do, is actually go through them, and you can go through the different commandments, and and I know a lot of people go, oh my gosh, when you're first coming into this, but we keep thousands of laws all the time. And you might be surprised how many laws you keep just getting in your car and going to town. You put on your seatbelt, you turn your lights on, you turn on a turn signal, you turn, so you keep 100 laws a day, usually without even thinking about them. So the point is that to keep the commandments, and I think there's 248 do's and the rest of the don't. So a lot of them are pretty simple anyway. We start out with the thou shalt have no other God but me. There's only one Elohim, and Yahweh is Echad. So we pretty much know where we start out with, and then it goes on, and it doesn't really get harder. It just gets to what we're doing, right? So we give the instructions, and as any good parent does, you teach your children, the stove is hot, please don't touch it. Please don't do this, please don't do that. Now, if they do it or not, you can't watch them all the time. If they go put their hand to that stove, they're going to realize that burnt. And that's what I submit a lot of people do in life, that they didn't realize that was going to cause that reaction until it does. But once we realize it, and that's why Yahweh wants us to teach the children, because he don't want anybody to be harmed. The whole part of the instructions, contrary to popular belief, is no one should be harmed. I shouldn't be harmed. You shouldn't be harmed. No one should be harmed. Nobody should be hurt. He wants us to live a happy, abundant life, and he gave us the instructions to do so. And that way we don't hurt each other. We don't steal things from each other. We don't take things from each other. And even if we borrow from each other, we know we need to give it back. So, it's really, really good instructions. Deuteronomy 5:6. I am Yahweh, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I am Yahweh, your Elohim. I'm a jealous Elohim, visiting the iniquity of the fathers of the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. Now, that's some very, very different wording than a lot of times we realize. So he takes this as, hate speech. He takes this as a hating. And this is where I think another disconnect is, that what his thinking and what he brings to the table is what we have to accept. I know a lot of people will say, well, I have dolphins, or I have this, or they have all these different things. But he's saying if you have these carved images, whatever they are, whether the dolphins, clouds, birds, doves, whatever that you have that don't have them. And then he even goes as far as saying that you hate him. Now, somebody comes and says, if you love me, keep my commandments. So you see the contrast, that it's not nothing's changed. It's the same wording. It's just in reverse, right? So that's where I would believe that why Yeshua said that. If you love me, keep the commandments. So he's reiterating the same things that we see that's going on here, where a lot of people say, well, he's taken or changing things. But if you look at what he's really saying, he's actually making it harder. It's not contradicting. He's making it harder. Well, they said that if you commit adultery, but I say if you look at a woman, you've just done it. Why? Because that's where it leads to, right? What's in the heart and what's in the eyes, what it's leading to. And we all know that. We all see, the stuff that's on TV, the stuff that they're putting out, even the Disney things, there's, some things that we set before our children and we think it's a wholesome thing, or we think it's a Mickey Mouse or something. And we think, wow, that can't be bad. And then come to find out, wow, really? Why would you have these in there? How can that be in something that we thought was a cartoon? And then, because the world's always trying, the enemies is always trying to put something in there to change us away from the commandments, right? Exodus 20:2, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And again, it almost sounds like when we go through scriptures, it sounds like it's repeating. But if you notice, when he's saying the same things over and over and over, just like the Sabbath day, I think there's more Sabbath day than there is any other feast, any other Moedim. So when he keeps saying it, it's just like us telling the children, hey, it's Monday. It's time to take out the trash. Like, yeah, I know. Yeah, but it's Monday. It's time to take out the trash. Well, you've told me 3 times. Well, it's still sitting by the door. So if you would take it out, we wouldn't have to just talk. I wouldn't have had to say it 3 times. You should have done it, right? So we see the same things here, that he's reiterating that he really means what he means. So we'll go on to Matthew 22:34. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Now, this is what we see today, too, that people will say, okay, well, what's the greatest commandment? Which is the one? If I was going to follow one, what would I follow? And the same thing is going on all over the world. And he said to him, you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And this is where the church says, well, look, there's only one commandment. I only have to keep one. But we know when we study Deuteronomy 6:4 that that is the commandment. But upon that commandment is everything. Because if we love him, and just like I said a while ago, Yeshua said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. So if we love, going back to the marriage, if you love your wife, if you love your husband, when they say something, you will do it, not because you have to obey them, not because you're worried of a divorce, not because, right, you're going to do it. And we see it many times. That's where we come into all these different days. The one that's coming up, we don't celebrate it. But, if you wasn't a part of this when you first got married, you was probably doing all things on February 14th to please what you thought was pleasing, right? And I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying that's what a lot of times happens. But that's where we get away from the commandments here. That's when we get away from even the Creator, because we're only picking our days, right? That's why the Sabbath, I believe, is the key to everything, because it opens up. We are in a covenant with the Creator. And he says, if you love me, keep my commandments. And all we have to do is say, look, we're going to come and meet with you on your time. You made it. So why wouldn't I just come and meet with you when you told me to? And if you had a serious doctor's appointment, and I said, we found something wrong with your heart. We think we could fix it, but you got to be here at 9 a.m. You probably wouldn't show up at 3 p.m. and go, here I am. You'd probably been there kind of early, trying to figure out, hey, they can help me. I'm hoping, right? So with all that being said, why would we not meet the Creator? Why would we not do what he says and just follow his law and what he says to do? So again, you shall love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And this is the great and first commandment. So, I mean, it's amazing that all we have to do is love him and show him that we do love him. And he doesn't want robots. He didn't want, if he wanted a robot, he would have made one. If he wanted someone who just followed everything, then that's what he would have made. And even the angels, we see that in Lucifer, Hasatan, that he still had a choice. They still have a right or wrong ability, right? And that proves love, does it not? If we know that we are going to a picnic and we know you don't have to show up, but whoever wants to show up, we're going to do it in the backyard and we're going to do this. And if everybody comes outside, then we feel loved, we feel appreciated, right? So the same thing with the Creator here. If we are doing what he says to do, then how much more will he bless us? How much more is he going to show us that favor and that mercy and the grace that we really need? We'll do one more before we close up, and then we can go to questions or answers or prayer. Now, when Yeshua had finished these sayings, he went away from Galilee and entered the region of Judea beyond the Jordan, and large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. And the Pharisees came to him and tested him by asking, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? And he answered, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? You got to watch where you say that today, right? And he said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So the same thing that we're seeing, that they are becoming one flesh. And the same thing that I would submit that we should become is we let him do his work and we do our work, but both of them come into one, right? A cod that we learn, if we're doing the right way, if we're on the right path, it's only going to lead us to one place. And that's wherever Yahweh wants us to be. It's wherever he has us to be destined. And we see that in scriptures. If we go against him, then that's where we see people doing things that are unlawful, that, even the world, when they do unlawful things, they get in trouble, right? If you do something, you go out here and throw a rock through somebody's window, you wouldn't expect to be, patted on the back and the guy come out and say, oh, well, that's fine and dandy. I'm glad you broke my window. I appreciate it. He would be like, have you lost your mind? You at least got to repair it. The same thing that the law tells us to do. If you break something, fix it. If you take somebody's things, even if you wrongfully committed something, then you make it right, and that's not too much to ask for. It's not too much to say, that we can't do it. So with all that being said, I think it's pretty clear that when we're fighting against, now I really shouldn't say fight, but when we're talking to others And it seems like it's a fight, because they're coming against a lot of times, but it's years and years of frustration, aggravation, and things of that nature, I believe. But they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand, and for that case as well, some people are not really knowingly, it becomes a battle, instead of being what we see here is Yeshua just told them, and that was that. He just said what he had to say, and he tried to give them informed information. And even if they didn't like it, he didn't sit there and fight with them and go on and carry it too far, and that's what a lot of times I believe that a lot of people do. A lot of times we can spend a lot of time on people, and it does seem right sometimes. I've spent probably 6, 7, 8 hours sometimes with people on Facebook and given verses, and you think you're getting somewhere just to have them block you and say bad words, and you're like, well, that didn't turn out how I thought it would be. But a lot of times what's in people's heart, if they want to follow the Creator, they will. If they don't, they won't. And we have to understand that, as hurtful as that may be, the best thing we can do is keep showing shalom and love and just keep pushing forward. And that's all we can do, is keep taking care of what we can take care of. So is there any questions or comments at this time?
Shabbat Shalom, Brother Greg.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for inviting me. It's really nice to, be with brothers and sisters more and fellowship and